For the television talk show Issues here on the grounds of Jackson, Mississippi at the Capitol. From the Capitol to the Golden Triangle area in Columbus, Mississippi. I'm your host and executive producer, Rick Mason, along with my wife, Aisha Jefferson Mason. More to come. Check us out each and every Saturday morning on the all-new WLOB CW at 5:30 a.m. and Sunday nights at 10 p.m. on My Mississippi, where we're bringing you informative news and so much more to come. For the television talk show Issues.
Episode of Issues Television Talk Show, sitting here with our DA Scott Plum. This Wednesday's updates with the District Attorney's Office, and hey, it's Wednesday today. Welcome back to the show.
Man, thank you for having me. Thank you for reaching out to me about doing this. Always willing to answer questions and be transparent.
Yes, it's a lot going on in our city right now that is transpiring through the social media. The public, the community has been reaching out, been asking questions, issues. What are you going to do? District Attorney Scott Plum, what are you going to do? Well, we're here today to try to answer some of these questions and explain what has taken place from our view versus what you're seeing throughout social media and now around the world, because people are calling from everywhere. Again, the topic is about the situation that took place here a few days ago with two juveniles. Understood, one is 17, one is 13, if I'm not mistaken. And it seemed to be disagreement about something. So can you spearhead on what you know or what has taken place with this particular situation?
Thank you for that question. The first thing I need to do is we really need to take a step back and let people know that our heart goes out to the family of this 13-year-old. I mean, when I saw the video, it was extremely disturbing. Chills. And, you know, I didn't really look and focus so much on the person who had the gun. I was hearing what he was saying, which was so, you know, insane and so disrespectful and so vile. But I was looking at his face, and it was a face of someone that
seemed to be terrified.
Terrified and just, you know, my focus was on him. And so immediately after it happened, I reached out to the mother and been trying to work with her to make sure she understands the process, to make sure that she knows what her legal rights are, and that she's informed, and she's been very cooperative. I mean, and so I wasn't really following social media and what people were saying, because whenever you're in a position of authority, people are gonna have opinions, regardless.
Yes.
You know, and a lot of times it'll be wrong. But let me make a couple things clear, since you reached out to me and told me that there was some miseducation. First of all, with the juvenile who's pointing the gun, I'm not going to say his name because I'm not allowed to say that at this point. But when you are a juvenile, there's only certain ways you can be charged with a felony, right? The first way is you can commit an offense that carries up to life, right? If you commit a murder, even as a juvenile, we would have felony jurisdiction right away, all right? If you commit sexual assault of a child 10 or 11 years old, we have jurisdiction right away because that carries life. If you commit an armed robbery, that can carry up to life. We can get jurisdiction right away. So that's one way that a juvenile can be in felony court right away. The other way that you typically see is a juvenile commits a crime with a weapon, right? That is a felony, right? It's got to be a weapon that's a felony charge. And so in this situation, whenever you have a gun involved, the question is it aggravated assault, right? Because aggravated assault is a felony. Now, if you use a weapon, a deadly weapon, and I think everybody would consider a gun a deadly weapon, and you cause any injuries, that's a felony, right? So if you and me, Rick, we get into a fight, and I punch you, typically that's going to be simple assault, right? If two juveniles get into a fight, they use their hand, unless one of the juveniles really beats the other one down and causes serious bodily injury, that's always going to be a simple assault misdemeanor. Now, if I use a gun and I shoot you, or if I pistol whip you with a gun, and it causes any type of injury, it is a felony. It's aggravated assault.
What do you consider an injury?
What the law says is it has to be bodily injury. You know, it doesn't have to be serious bodily injury if a deadly weapon is used, but it's got to be bodily injury. Now, to be frank with you, honestly, a lot of times these questions are answered by grand juries. You know, because to get a felony indictment, you've got to go to grand jury, and the grand jury is made up of 20 to 25 randomly selected citizens, and they would listen to the evidence, and they would decide, in their opinion, based on what the victim says their injuries are, based on the medical records, based on, any documentation, whether that can be considered bodily injury, right? It does have to be some bodily injury. And then if you get 12 of the 20 to 25 that said we think there's enough injury, then you get an indictment, and then it goes through the felony process, right? So for aggravated assault with a juvenile, if there's a deadly weapon used, like a gun, and there's any injury, you can't have felony jurisdiction, okay? So in this situation, I talked to the sheriff a couple times over the last, I think yesterday we talked. All right, that's right. Just hang that up. But anyways, so I talked to the sheriff a couple times. And if you read the end of the article that the dispatch put out, he said in that article that the case is going to go to the grand jury, right? Because as DA, I don't do the charging. The Columbus Police Department, they do the initial charging. The Sheriff's Office, they do the initial charging. That's for all 4 counties in my jurisdiction. I don't do the initial charging, right? What I control is the grand jury process. I talked to him yesterday. He said, yeah, we both agree that this is a grand jury call. Because if you look at that video, the question is that victim, does he suffer injuries? Does he suffer any bodily injury? And there are some stuff that the grand jury have to decide, looking at the video, looking at did he go to the hospital? Did he have, did he complain to his parents about injury? Is there pictures of an injury? Because if there's any bodily injury, because the assailant used a gun, it could be aggravated assault, and it could be in adult court. It could be a felony court.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. And I did get a statement from Sheriff Eddie Hawkins. They did send me a statement, and I thank you for that, Eddie Hawkins, for the statement. Also, when you made the statement about what you just said, what was his bond? What did he bond out? Is he still in jail or out of jail?
My understanding is he's still in custody. I don't really handle the initial process.
I'm just curious about whether you knew if he
my understanding, he did not. My understanding, if I'm wrong, I apologize, because a lot of the juvenile stuff is secret.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I don't get told about it. Okay. So the initial decision to charge, I believe that the sheriff put out that he charged him with misdemeanor, and it was handled in youth court. Him and I talked, and we both decided that it's a grand jury question, whether the injuries are there enough, and we're going to present it to the grand jury. The other issue that, I don't think people understand is there's another felony investigation that's going on in regards to this person. And I don't want to go into too many details about it, because the rules, I have to be very careful about what I say about a pending case, because then it can be used against me to accuse me from the case later. But what I can tell you, I think if you go to the article, you actually read what the sheriff said. He says there's another felony investigation going on, and we plan to present it to a grand jury.
Understood.
Right? So, there's several moving factors, and my focus has been on trying to make sure the mother of the victim is totally aware of her rights, that she's informed of the process. And it's also important that the public know, I'm never scared to answer any questions to the public, right?
Correct.
Good, bad,
open door policy.
Open door policy, and if people would have tagged me, I would have done this video earlier. But I had to hear about it from you. So sometimes people just want to draw attention to themselves. But I'm not scared to answer any questions. But yeah, for a juvenile, it can be considered a felony. The initial decision as to what arrests are made by local law enforcement. Once it gets to my office, I handle the grand jury part of it. And my understanding is there's some serious charges that this person is facing that are going to go to the grand jury. Let me answer another question that's on top of my head, because I want to answer a question that people ask in the comments. There was a question about why this is not a hate crime. Okay. All right. So here's what the law is, and the state law is in Mississippi on hate crimes. Right? Now, if you commit a hate crime, you shoot somebody because they're black, you rape somebody because they're white, if you do anything because of somebody's race, typically the first thing that's going to happen is there's going to be federal investigation, because the feds actually have jurisdiction over hate crimes. What state law has is enhancements. There's no crime that says, listen, you did something to somebody because of their race. This is a hate crime in Mississippi. What we have is enhancements. So if somebody commits an aggravated assault, and you can prove that they committed the aggravated assault because of the person's race, then that can enhance the person's punishment. But you still have to have the evidence to prove the aggravated assault the armed robbery, the sexual battery, whatever the underlying felony is, you still have to have evidence to prove that. If you can also prove that the crime was committed because of the person's race, then it can be an enhancement, right? Yeah, but that's still something you have to prove, Rick. I mean, you know, you can't just assume that every time a person commits a crime against somebody of the race, it's always because of their race, right? There could be other factors. You know, for example, I'll tell you a case. There was a case several years ago now where a Mississippi State student was killed in the Cotton District. People probably forgot about it. But anyways, initially it was the defendant and all the suspects were black, and the victim was white. And the family of the victim came to me, they said to me, why isn't this a hate crime? The person who shot him was black and my child was white. And I told them there was not any evidence that the shooting was a result of the person's race. You have to have evidence that the crime was because of the race. And so to prove the enhancement, first we got to get a grand jury to indict it. Then you have to ask the grand jury, what evidence do you have that there wasn't some other motive that was in regards to it? Because if somebody commits an aggravated assault because they feel like somebody is messing with a girl or they feel like they're disrespecting them or something like that, then you don't get the enhancement. You have to prove that it was done because of the person's race. That's what the law requires. That's not Scott Cologne making that up. That's what the law requires you to do.
Wow, pretty interesting. So can you understand or see why the community is so upset about this matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is whenever you have a vacuum of information, then people start making assumptions.
Add more to the conversation.
Yeah, there can be, you know, conspiracies that get out there. Listen, I don't know anybody involved in any of this. I don't know any of these people. Before I saw the video, I didn't know anybody. And my focus was doing my part as a DA to make sure the investigation, I was briefed about the investigation. The sheriff's office typically does good investigations, right? So I gave him legal advice. I talked to the sheriff. We had a very open and transparent conversation. He agreed with me. I don't know if a grand jury would indict. It looks very, very bad. It does look horrible. What he did was horrible. But to get to the aggravated assault, the other juvenile has to have some bodily injury. And it's going to depend on what he told the investigators, whether he went to the hospital, whether he told his parents he felt injured, whether there was any marks. You do have to have evidence. It's not just the video. You got to have evidence to get to the aggravated assault. And so my focus is always on the long term, because what we're going to have to do is get enough evidence to get an indictment, and we got to get enough evidence to get a conviction. And a conviction is not easy. It takes 12 out of 12 to get a conviction. And the other thing that was a wrinkle in this case that I think created a vacuum is there were other, outside of just this video, there's another investigation going on about this person that's very, very serious. And they're being very patient in trying to investigate to get all the dies out of it, the I's out of the T's crossed. Because that case is also very serious. And it has somebody that really cares about making sure it's done well. And so they're focused on making sure they get that investigation right, because that's also important. It's not just this video. There's something else going on here. And then the more people start talking about this, the more I had somebody message me yesterday about another video of this person doing threatening behavior with a gun. Now, but that stuff has to be reported. It's got to be reported, So, but I'm happy to do the interview. Let me look at Priscilla sent me some more questions. You might want to look at them. Okay, yeah. So I think I explained how the DA gets involved. I get involved in the grand jury process. I don't make the charge. I don't make the decision about what charges people are arrested with. If the police call me, I give them my legal advice on it. But they make the initial charges, and then the case goes to the grand jury, and ultimately the grand jury makes a decision. I'm the grand jury's lawyer. I mean, part of my philosophy as a DA, and sometimes, not everybody likes it, but my philosophy, I try to empower the grand jury. I tell them what the facts are of the case. I don't try to hide anything. I tell them what the law is in the case. I don't try to hide anything. And then I trust that through that democratic process, they're going to make the right decision, because that's how our system works. It's decentralized. Individual people make decisions collectively, right? They make their own decision, but their decision has to be considered with the group. And that's my philosophy. I try to empower the grand jury. And the grand jury, if you listen to the citizen, they tell you what type of level of evidence they need for charging. And so I don't know. I told everybody, I don't know the grand jury how they would look at this. Because, you know, if he had hit the juvenile and knocked him out, right, and the juvenile had to go to the hospital because he had a concussion or something like that, that's easy to prove that was bodily injury, right? Mm-hmm. If he had a black eye, that's easy to prove that he had bodily injury. You know, if you look at the video, he hits him with the gun, the tip of the gun, and it's going to depend on what he says, what the kid says, whether he went to the hospital, whether he told his parents. I don't know, because at this point, that's not my part of the investigation.
Got to you, yes.
But the police have to get that information, and like I said, they also have another charge that they're investigating. That's very serious.
Yes.
You know, and somebody said, to explain my job as a district attorney. You know, here's what the reality is. My job is to be the lawyer for the police when they have answers to legal questions. When they answer legal questions, my job is to empower the grand jury, be the lawyer for the grand jury. If the grand jury indicts the case, at that point, I look at the evidence, I look at the person's prior history, and I try to get the best result. You know, and it's a situation where you can't always make everybody happy, because I gotta do what I think is fair, and ultimately there's other people that are in the system that have the decision-making power. The judges make the decision on sentencing, right? What I do is I make a recommendation as to what the plea is. If the person does not take that plea, then they're putting the sentence in the hands of the judge, right? Then the judge ultimately makes that decision. If I do make the plea recommendation and the person accepts it, the judge has to accept it.
In other words, you just give your opinion on this, that, other, but the judges are the one that gives the time.
Yeah, exactly. And they decide. Okay. And they have a voice. They're elected too. They get to this. They have a voice on what they think is appropriate. I have a voice in it, and I try to exercise my voice with the golden rule. This is my rule, and you can like it, love it, or hate it. But I promise you, if you were in this seat and you had to make decisions about affecting other people, you wouldn't be so quick to criticize me because they're not easy decisions. None of the decisions that come to my desk are easy, right? I get the tough decisions, but I try to follow the golden rule. I treat people the way I want to be treated.
Correct.
If somebody is charged with a crime, I treat them the same way I would want my children to be treated if they were charged with a crime. With a fair system, a fair investigation, don't look at who they are, just try to focus on what they did. That's it. So that's how I try to treat them, right? If a person is a victim of a crime, I try to treat that person like I would want my children treated, my two daughters. If they were victims of a crime, I would want them to get, police that investigate the case to the best of their abilities, prosecutors that listen to them and try to focus on their needs, and also try to figure out what's a fair punishment. So, that's my golden rule. That's what I tell my prosecutors, and I know that we're trying our best to keep our community safe and keep the justice system fair. That's what we have to do.
We'll be back in just a moment after these television commercial breaks. I'm your host and executive producer, Rick Mason, along with my wife, Aisha Jefferson Mason. More to come. Check us out on the WOBCW at 5:30 a.m. Central DVR, Sunday nights 10 p.m. on My Mississippi. Email the show issues, talk show at gmail.com, or either give us a call, 662-386-6064.
Issues will return after these commercial breaks. Stay tuned.
Television talk show Issues, sitting here with the District Attorney's Office. Scott Malone himself updates Wednesdays with the District Attorney's Office, and we're dealing with the situation that's taking waves throughout the Golden Triangle area and to other states now. Welcome back to the show.
The other question people ask me, I don't understand this, is why the city police, or why the mayor doing something? Man, the mayor and the city police got nothing to do with this.
No, Chief doesn't.
They
It's not in your jurisdiction.
It's not in their jurisdiction. They have nothing to do with it. They have nothing to do with it. And there is going to be a grand jury investigation where there are going to be serious felony charges considered. You just have to be a little bit patient. And I'm doing everything in my power to make sure that everybody in that situation is treated fairly. That's the only thing that matters. Everybody's treated fairly, because obviously the video is very disturbing. Anybody that sees that video is not disturbed, there's something wrong with it. Yeah, I think we all agree on that.
Yes.
But, we also have to follow the process. It's not like that and it's over with, So, you just got to follow the process. Somebody sent me a message about disabilities, right? I don't know if anybody in this situation has a disability. I'm not aware of that. When it comes to committing crimes against disabilities, there are definitely laws against that. but I'm not aware. I've never been briefed on anything about anybody having a disability involved in this situation. So to charge the parents, you have to prove that they contributed to the child's delinquency, right? That they did something to allow this to happen. And that's a slippery slope, right? One is a misdemeanor. It's not a felony, it's a misdemeanor. Because the way the law is written. So you have to have tougher laws, right? But that's a slippery slope because if you toughen up those laws, there's a lot of moms that really can't control their kids. Because I get asked this all the time, why can't we charge the mom? Why can't we charge the parent? Well, you can't assume that every mother can control their 60-year-old child. You have to have some evidence that they're either being neglectful or they're, encouraging this. You have to have some evidence to develop this because, if the 60-year-old is just being rambunctious and taking things into his own hand, you can't necessarily just assume that the parents are responsible for that. You have to have some evidence that they're responsible. And it's a misdemeanor. Unless you cause, when it comes to contributing to the delinquency of a minor, you had a situation where like maybe a parent left their child in the car. On accident, they totally forgot they left their child in the car. And you had some situations where children have died in that circumstance. Well, that's contributing to the delinquency because you didn't do proper supervision and the child died. They have to voluntarily go to rehab. And if they don't voluntarily go to rehab, then they have to wait till they get in trouble.
And that goes back to your program that you offer for those who are on drugs. Get help before they come to your...
Absolutely. I mean, I have a pretrial diversion program where we try to help a bunch of people. And there are a lot of people that get help through the program. There's a lot of people that made, first-time mistakes that benefited from the fact that I looked at them and I looked at their situation. I said, this is not a person that needs a felony in the record. This is not a person that needs to go to prison. This is a person that made a simple mistake. They'll never make a mistake again. But those people aren't going to do a bunch of Facebook posts saying, thank God Scott helped me, right? Because they want to move on with their life. It's only the people that commit something violent or they repeatedly commit crimes and then, they may be upset about the result of what happened to their behavior. But you got to always remember, I don't invite anybody. I don't invite nobody to the criminal justice system. You have to send me an invitation, right? If you go about your life, work, take care of take care of yourself. I mean, one of the things I'm all about is education and employment. That's how you prevent crime. So, but ultimately, if you commit a violent crime, it's not my fault if you have to be punished for it because we can't allow violence to happen in our community. We cannot tolerate it. Any more questions we get, Jay?
Any final remarks that you would like to?
The proof is a video, so why does it have to go to trial? Why does it have to go to grand jury?
Well, listen, come on. You think I can just say, there's a video? Let's take an example, right? An example even worse than this. There was a shooting at a nightclub in Columbus where somebody was shot and killed, and then 6 or 7 people were shot. The next day, we had the video. That didn't mean I could just, okay, well, he's going to prison for the rest of his life. I still had to go through the process. We had to go to the grand jury. We had to show the video to the grand jury. The grand jury had to indict him. Then we had to get it ready for trial. We went to trial. We got a guilty verdict. So I agree the video is evidence, but you still have to go through the process. There's no way to get around the process. There's no way to do it. And, my job is to make sure the case is ready for grand jury. That's my focus. And sometimes, it's not, I don't blame anybody in the audience, that feels this way. But it's a little bit of part of our culture where we want like short-term satisfaction, right? We just want the short-term satisfaction of somebody being in jail. And we're not focused on the long-term result. I have to focus on the long-term result. Because it does me no good for somebody to be, in jail for 3 or 4 days and then 6 months later the case falls apart and, the charges have to be dismissed and that person's out for the rest of their life. But I got to focus on what is the evidence I need to get an indictment? What is the evidence I need to get a conviction? In this situation, I can already tell anybody out there what's going to come down to is whether there was bodily injury. Whether there was bodily injury. And you have to, your opinion on that, if you're on a grand jury, you get picked. You get to vote and say, this is my opinion. I see the video, there's bodily injury. I vote for aggravated assault. But you have to also respect the opinion of other people. They get to say, I look at the video, I look at the hospital records, I look at et cetera, and I get to decide whether I think there's bodily injury or not. But there has to be bodily injury. Because otherwise, he's juvenile and it goes to youth court. The only way you get to big court is if you get to the aggravated assault.
Gotcha.
And it's going to go to the grand jury. It's going to go to the grand jury. If you read the end of the article, The sheriff said the case is going to the grand jury.
And again, he did send me a statement. Thank Sheriff Eddie Hawkins for following up with a statement about what was about to take place and what's going to take place.
Yeah. So you got to care about the positive stuff as much as you care about the negative stuff. Because I also care about the positive stuff. Now, I'm not trying to discourage nobody from protesting. If you feel the need to protest, that's your First Amendment right. But I'm also saying protest the positive stuff too, because we also need to get attention on that. We need to get attention on that. We have to change our perception. You know, there's some places where people have a negative perception of Columbus, and it's not the Columbus I know. They don't know. I read somebody the other day. They said, man, y'all be having shoes every day in Columbus. And I'm like, no, we don't. No, we don't. Do we have too many shoes? Yes, we have too many. But there's no community in the state that has zero shootings. And I can tell you, there's some cities, they would be begging
For this type of
zero murder this year.
Yeah.
There's cities that are smaller than us. If they had zero murder this year, they'd be jumping up and down. They'd be doing a parade down the middle of the street. Everybody would be there. But we also got to protest the positive.
Yes. But it's pretty interesting. It's been a great set down here. This is Attorney Scott Blum again. Man, we got more to come with Issues Television Talk Show. Don't forget on tomorrow, Trotter Convention Center. They have a young man coming to speak to ages 13 and up. Bring your kids out. He said he's a former mobster that has changed his life around, and a group of guys throughout the city got together to bring him here to be able to speak and talk. It's free.
Packed.
6 p.m. they're going to be feeding free.
Should be packed.
Great information. So bring your kids out to this event. Parents, churches, ethnic groups, whatever the case may be, come out, be a part of this. Boys and Girls Club. Bring the boys groups over here so that they can get educated about what has taken place.
And let me make one final point, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Now, before this interview, did you and I talk about what we were going to talk about?
No.
I didn't ask you to get there was no limits on this conversation.
No.
You can ask me any question you want. And somebody said to me that, why you always doing these interviews with Rick? He, because Rick is out there in the community, he tells me, when he asks me for an interview, it's like asking me for an interview. If you out there and you want to interview me for your show.
Not only that, you do updates weekly. Yes. It's just like Therapy Thursday with Dr. Armando Adams.
Right.
Friday Entertainment. So we just try to bring awareness to the community. That's my format. That's my plan. That's what I'm trying to help our community. This is why I'm here. Because you have people that's not going to give you all the information you need or give it. This platform here lets you say and do what you feel. It's not edited, it's live.
I'm not scared of any question, and Rick ain't scared to ask me no question. I ain't never told Rick Mason don't ask me no question.
Never.
I ain't never denied him an interview.
Yeah.
If you ever want to interview me, and that goes for other people. If people want to interview me, you got a platform. Everybody got a podcast now. I'm happy to do it. I mean, obviously I got to still do my job.
Yeah.
But I'm happy. It's just Rick asked me, and I'm not the type of person to say no. If he got a platform and he's trying to, inform the community, I want to support that. So I'm always going to support Rick when he's doing positive stuff.
Thank you so much. I hope it continues to do positive things.
Absolutely.
We got more to come. Thanks for the set down again. District Attorney's Office, Scott Malone, 662-386-6064 if you want to be a part of Issues Television Talk Show. Come on the show, talk about what you're dealing with, whatever the case may be. Again, I'm the host and executive producer, along with my wife, Aisha Jefferson Mason. Stick and stay. We got more to come. Issues. The morning kickback.
The morning kickback.
Blessings to each and every one of you in the Golden Triangle. Stick and stay for the television talk show, Issues.